Hey, RedEye, I'm Damien Chazelle. I wrote and directed Whiplash, which opens in Chicago on October 17th.
Well, at the risk of conjuring up nightmares, can you tell me something you remember from that era when you were practicing or in the band and having nightmares about his tutelage?
Well, I remember kind of just the sort of cycle every day of, we'd have rehearsal every day, and so my heartbeat would start getting elevated a few hours before, and it just became almost like a biological clock thing that I just, and then I'd sort of, the parts of the day that I would feel the most calm and relieved would be like, right after rehearsal, 3 p.m. to like 5 p.m.
Because it's the most possible amount of time until you have another rehearsal.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, but the thing I specifically remember happening a lot that I really kind of, to me, was really the starting point for all the rehearsal scenes of the movie was him just stopping and starting me over and over again, and that kind of repetition.
Like for every mistake, the way that J.K. Simmons does
or
in the movie.
sort of deciding that I wasn't in tempo, and that I wasn't doing his tempo, and so then
not quite my tempo.
Yeah, exactly, like that, and just like over and over and over again, where I'd be at the point where I was literally only getting like a single beat out, and be like, no, that's not right. I remember once
one beat doesn't have a tempo.
No, once he decided that my downbeat on a bass drum was either a hair early or a hair late every time, and so he made me repeat just doing this in front of the band for like half an hour. It was literally the most humiliating moment of my life. So, that's kind of that like, I think I knew immediately, like, that's what the rehearsal scenes would revolve around, and then they grow from there and they get more extreme from there in the movie. But like that idea of that was something I hadn't really seen before, and it seemed kind of both funny and fucked up to me, just the kind of the rhythm of stopping and starting, where you start to feel like a monkey as a drummer. You start to lose at a certain point after you've been told that you're off tempo like 10 times. You start to lose. Your mind starts to you start to lose what's your playing gets worse and worse and worse. You start to lose what sense of tempo you even had to begin with.
How often, when you were writing like all the bile that comes out of JK's mouth in this movie, did you have to be like, that's over the line, that is too much? Like, was there anything that you're like, that's so mean, I have to dial it back?
No, it was the opposite. It was always trying to push it as mean as possible. I tried to, I kind of like set myself sort of a goal with the character from the outset, which was just basically that because he has this philosophy, and because sometimes we see that philosophy yielding results, like, perhaps at the end of the movie, like his behavior should be as kind of categorically monstrous as possible when he's in the rehearsal element, and that there was a shock, like there needed to be a shock there to that. It needed to really rip the Band-Aid off this idea of music school as a nice place where we share our feelings musically, and, you know what I mean, that it needed to, yeah. So it was very kind of conscious from the get-go of like pushing it to that edge, and then JK is really good at actually, he in a way helps ground it. He helps sort of flesh out the edges.
Well, I read that you sort of wanted, because of the intensity of what the characters are doing, to an extent, you kind of wanted to be kind of direct with a gentle hand. I had a phone interview with J.K. Simmons on Friday, actually, and he said that, being a young filmmaker, that you were a little bit deferential to him, during the short in particular, and that, you guys talked, and he was like, feel free to direct me. I want this to be a collaboration, and I want you to tell me what to do. Is there a moment you can think of during the feature that you felt like you were aware of that balance in your mind of like wanting to both go easy but also really needing to tell people what to do, whether it was like telling them to bring it higher, make it crazier, or just anything that you were wondering, like, how do I play this as a somewhat new director?
Yeah, I was lucky to have really nice actors. I didn't have any divas. That's really something directors always have horror stories about, actors who just will just not be directed, and will basically take over the set, and you have to sort of deal with it. In this case, it helped that I it helped at least that sort of I knew the world better than anyone else on set. Like that, it's, at the end of the day, it's like I was sort of the authority on set on this world. So, with the actual exception of some of the extras and some of the other band members who actually were music students and were actually currently in that sort of rigmarole. So, but when it came to J.K. Miles, and some of the other leading cast members, I mean, I kind of I tried to sort of, we would do, sort of try to kind of let them take their own approach to the material first, and then I would sort of make adjustments when I needed. But I often didn't need to make that many adjustments, especially with JK. It was always micro stuff. It was always, saying saying something a little quieter, saying something a little louder, going faster on this, like tempo, level, like just kind of really sort of fine-tuning.
But never, like, throw that chair harder. He pretty much did that well on his own.
Yeah, he's a pretty good chair thrower. I mean, there would be slapping Miles harder. That was, that was more in the short, though. I think there was some slaps in the short. I remember where he was trying to take it easy on the kid. Mm-hmm. Then, that makes sense. He's the one doing the slapping. That's the moment where I have to be an asshole and I have to be the bad cop and just say, slap the shit out of him. But that's...
How do you say that without... I feel like that's a hard direction to give without screaming, like, just slap him already. So, like, can you slap him harder, please?
You do the take, and then you go up. I try to give my directions very kind of, quietly and intimately, in the sense that it's not like I'm not using a megaphone barking from the director's chair. It's more just kind of, I try to ask them how, I try to make it a dialogue. You ask the actors how they felt about, how they feel about stuff that's going, if they have anything to add, and then I add my pointers, but so that it never feels... I think the best kind of working relationships is where it doesn't feel like it's just them following orders. It's more, but it's also not me just kowtowing to whatever they say. It's an actual conversation, and maybe they'll do a take the way I want it, and then they'll do their own thing on the next take, and you kind of just find that compromise in a way. But compromise is probably the wrong word, because that suggests you're giving up stuff. It's more that you meet in the middle.
Sure. I thought it'd be fun to play a game. I'll list off some well-known drummers, and if you can speculate on what they would think about this movie and the portrait of drumming and music, I thought that'd be fun.
Sure.
We'll start with John Bonham.
John Bonham, I don't know. I think he would like it. It's certainly the... It's a movie about, obviously it's a movie about a jazz drummer, but the climactic solo is pretty sort of jazz version on John Bonham-esque. So maybe he would see a little bit of his influences in there. I think he'd be into it.
How about Buddy Rich?
Well, Buddy Rich, I mean, I do think that he would. That would be the one person, that I kind of would most want to see the movie if he were alive. And I think we worked with his daughter, who kind of runs the estate now, to get some of his, materials in the movie, his image and certain sound clips. And, he was the guy who I sort of worshipped as I was drumming. But he's also the perfect figure for this movie, because he was not only kind of one of the definitive big band jazz drummers, but he was also a notoriously tyrannical band leader. So I feel like I remember there was a trombone player who was, or it was a trumpeter. It was one of Buddy's trumpeters in the big band who came and saw the movie a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, and talked to me about it afterwards. He was just like, oh, that's exactly what Buddy was like. Buddy was. Wow. Buddy was a total prick, and but at the same time, he looks back on those days playing with Buddy Rich as just the most glorious days that he experienced as a musician, and he said that he felt that if Buddy were alive to see the movie, he wouldn't be. It's not like he wouldn't be pissed off. He would be moved by it. So I like to think that that's the case. You never know. Buddy Rich was a very short-tempered guy. So
how about Meg White?
Well, that's like a different approach to drumming in a way. I mean, I love Meg White, I love the White Stripes, but I this movie's really about technique. So it's and that's kind of where a lot of jazz veers away from rock and roll. That a lot of rock and roll and people like John Bonham are the exception here, but a lot of rock and roll is really not so much, especially in drumming. Technique is important, but it's really just about emotion, and it's about kind of, it's why some of the best rock and roll is played by people who literally just basically can't play their instruments, 4 chords and a single rock beat. And that literally, to me, that's actually, like, I don't look down on that music. That to me is like, that's the heart and soul of rock and roll in that form.
Sure.
And it's a less I actually get bored by a lot of like overly technically involved rock and roll personally. But this movie and big band jazz, it's just a different kind of idiom. It's a different kind of art form, and the technical mountain to climb is just a lot higher. So yeah, again, I mean, I hope all these people would like it, but I feel like she would. It would be interesting to see her take on it, because I think it's in many ways about it. It's a different approach to the instrument.
How about Animal from the Muppets?
Well, he would love it. He's basically Buddy Rich as a Muppet. So he would love it. You could totally replace Miles with Animal at the end of this movie, and it would work just as well, I think.
Or just the whole movie.
The whole movie, actually, yeah. Have Animal just get screamed at, and then finally Animal goes berserk and plays a crazy drum solo. I would see that movie.
I was trying to think of other filmmakers who are your age that have done what you've done in the last year, and I'm struggling to come up with any. Who else can you name that you feel like is kind of on this this level?
You mean like young directors?
Yeah, I mean someone under 30 who is.
Well, I mean, there's always the. I guess this year I'm not sure, but I mean I love. In terms of like the past couple years, I got to know, I wouldn't say I got to know, but I got to meet a couple times, Ryan Coogler through Sundance and everything. He's both the nicest person alive, and also I just think one of the best young filmmakers out there, and or best filmmakers out there, period. So people like that, I don't know, people like him and Ben Zeitlin the year before, like those were my inspirations. I remember kind of sitting at my desk and hearing about those movies or reading about those movies and going to see those movies in the theater, and that was those were in a sense like, obviously, yeah, like the influences in this movie are like a lot of older filmmakers and Scorsese and De Palma and whatever, but the people who actually really get me off my ass and actually like motivate me to like, all right, fuck it, I gotta like do some work, are the young people, the people my generation who are doing great shit. And,
sure.
So yeah.
A lot of people are picking up on the moment in the movie, this notion of like the most dangerous words in the English language being good job. What do you think of those like participation trophies that kids get with sports? Just like basically you showed up, you're on the team, good job.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. I grew up partly in France, and so I remember coming from the U.S. to France, like the kids would, their image of America, other than just, the typical, potato chips and TV and big cars and, McDonald's, other than the kind of like typical stuff, what they would sort of say to me is, and it had never occurred to me before I went to school there was, it's so weird, in America, I went to America once, everyone says good job there. Those were the two words that they associated with America. So there was constant, like, congratulations. And it's true, France is not like that at all. You don't say good job in France at all. So I guess it's an interesting sort of American thing. But the other thing that's interesting to me about the whole good job thing, the whole kind of like being easy on people, is that in many ways America, there's no country in the world that's harder on people than America at the same time. There's no safety net if you don't succeed by kind of society's standards in America, at least not compared to Europe, So at least in terms of France versus America, on the one hand, France kind of coddles people a lot less. On the other hand, it helps them out a lot more when they fall down. And so I think this idea of excellence at all costs is a very kind of profoundly American idea, for better or worse. I think it's produced a lot of good. It's also caused a lot of problems in this country.
France does not have participation trophies, is what you're saying?
No, it doesn't. But it also...
or baseball.
There's no participation trophies in France, but there's, they kind of help you on your feet if you if you fall, whereas in America you're kind of on your own. So so that I've always found weirdly paradoxical about America. I didn't think about it too much in terms of like broad national things when I was writing the script. It was just sort of seemed like a funny thing that this asshole would say to justify being an asshole. But like any good villain or any villain that's sort of fun to write, he's got a point.
Gotta have a catchphrase.
Yeah, gotta have something for the T-shirt.